Stuck in traffic. Again. Oh, that's nice. So it focuses my dashboard, so most of that stuff is blurry. Oh no, it focused onto that car again. Go away, car, go away. Yep, I'm stuck in traffic. Guess I can play some music. Or not. That doesn't work. Battery saver mode. Let me fix that. Maybe I can play music now. Hmm. I guess not. So it's been a while since I did a vlog. You know, since I turned the camera on, I might as well just do that. Let's see what's going on in my life right now. I work at this company, not as an employee, but as a contractor, apparently. And most of their, actually, I should say, all of their tools are is Webdev. So the entire stack is Webdev, all web technologies. I don't have a problem with that. If you were making websites, Node.js is probably the crappiest thing I've ever touched. I mean, its purpose. It has no reason to exist, really. It's a tool made so that web developers can develop back-end systems, basically. Or at least that's what we use it for at the company that I work for. The main language for Node.js, as the name implies, is JS, JavaScript. And JavaScript is absolutely the worst language, given the vast capabilities that it has, compared to other languages that also has a very vast capabilities. It is the worst language. I can. I used to hate Java. You know, I used to hate on Java a lot, But JavaScript just brings a whole new level of hate out of me. Like, actually, let me reiterate. It's not the language per se. The language itself is horrendous on its own. But then you have all these quote unquote technologies, right? Like we have Angular, and we have what else we had? We have what else did we use? We used Angular, and we used, I forget, Express. There we go, Express. So Angular and Express. Express isn't too bad because it's very focused and it's good at what it does. It's kind of like a boilerplate generator or automation kind of thing. Angular, on the other hand, tries to be this entire ecosystem, and for a web developer, learning tools, sure, that's part of that's 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 the status quo basically, right? You're a web developer, you pick up web tools, and you learn the tools. As a web developer, as a programmer, or a software developer, I think the heart of that is to program, is to write code to do, basically bend the computer to your will. All right, and by use of code. Now, as a web developer, they feel they're like borderline script kiddie, basically. So if you aren't familiar, a script kiddie is someone who uses tools, or in this case, scripts, that are made for them. They didn't write it themselves. They were made. These tools were made for them, and then they just use those tools. And from what I have, from what I know, they like to taunt. Ooh, look what I can do! When it's really, the person who developed those tools, what they actually did. So, for me, as a programmer, I like to do everything as low level as I can get, but high level enough so that it's productive. It's rapid development, stuff like that. And basically, in the middle, like a compromise between super high performance and rapid development. I like to be in the middle. JavaScript, or my bad, not JavaScript. These web tools are very high end. They developed all these methods and patterns and all this stuff for you, and they're like, okay, you have to develop it and you have to use it exactly this way, and if you don't do it this way, things are going to break. As a programmer, that kind of workflow, that kind of mindset really bothers me, because depending on an application, the architecture could be completely different. All right. So, like, a server might behave differently from a game, for instance. A backend server could be different from a game, and a website. So you have these different applications, and you're trying to develop a ecosystem to fit all. That's just really dumb, I think. And it's funny because it's backed by Google. Google. Now, when I was a lot younger, I used to think, oh man, Google, this big empire, this big company, man, they smart, they know what they're doing, and all this, this hype around them, this this authority basically, right? They're like, oh man, we back Angular, we good, we develop it and everything. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's bloated as all hell. Um, there is a learning curve, which as a programmer, uh, there shouldn't be a learning curve. Um, Basically, the learning curve itself is just figuring out how you want to architect the system, basically. But now we have to have, okay, we want the feature, we want this feature. Okay, Angular works like this. So how can we somehow implement this feature with the constraints of Angular? You kind of just rip out all the flexibility that a programmer has at their disposal when you force upon them this freaking framework, a very constrained framework, to say the least. Now, frameworks themselves aren't bad. So I am very familiar with the .NET framework, for instance. But the framework exposes APIs that are kind of pretty much like the fundamental stuff, you know. While Angular, it goes very high level, so it starts to baby web developers. I feel like if you're using Angular or any of the high level web development ecosystems, frameworks, I feel like you're a baby. Like, I mean, if that's all you know, I meant to say, like, you don't know any other languages, you don't know any other environments, ecosystems, frameworks, and it's just web dev. I feel like you're a baby who spent extensive time trying to figure out a very big and complex framework and trying to fit yourself in, like trying to finagle, your way into being Angular compliant, basically building the app just the way Angular kind of forces you to be in. Now, that I can give you reasons why. So, let's say you have a feature that you want to implement, right? And Angular, because of your constraints, forces you, if you were to do it properly in Angular, maybe you have to do, some complex implementation of it. Um, because of such um, things for compatibility or whatever, you had to do it this way, right? And let's say this thing that you're implementing is a performance related thing. Because you had to be compliant with Angular and implement it properly, you had to sacrifice performance, for instance. Like, say in Angular, they try to get you away from using underlying, like the behind the scenes JavaScript, like the vanilla JavaScript. It tries to get you away from that. It tries to make you use methods like map, filter, stuff like that. And while those are great, when used properly and everything, um, in the right scenarios. I don't get this idea where it came from, like, oh, it's bad to implement your own algorithm. Like, as a programmer, algorithms and structures is like my base. Like, that's where I thrive, right? And as a programmer, that's how you solve problems, you know. But with Angular, they just want you to, like, no, here, we made this for you already. It takes these 4 parameters, right? Oh, wait, you need a 5th parameter? Too bad. You got to figure out how to do that while still doing it properly this way. You know, it kind of limits you. And as a programmer, you shouldn't be limited by your tools. You know, that's like, the tool itself should be the language and your brain. Anything that gets in the way of that is not a good tool. It's not a good tool at all. Something that constrains you, restricts you, hampers you, is detrimental to you as a developer. But we have, all these people who swear by, I don't even know who, fucking God, fucking, I don't know, swear to God. They swear by God that Angular is amazing. And I'm like, okay. I can implement everything that, say, Node can. Faster, more concise, more performant than the Node version. And they'll probably, because they lack, the knowledge, they're gonna be like, oh no, I don't believe it. But I know. First of all, JavaScript is single-threaded. By its very core design, it was single-threaded. Now, JavaScript has these workers that you can use to offload work onto separate threads. But they are not, how should I say this? They are not typical threads. You can't, the API for them. So on a worker and on the main JavaScript that your application runs on, they are completely separate environments, essentially. On a, let's just take .NET Core, for instance, which is already, I think, way better than Node and JS, whatever you want to separate the two, have them as one entity, don't matter. .NET Core, I think, wipes the floor with Node.js. Now, there is an argument for Node. Let's say you're you only want one language, for your company. And you're like, oh, I picked JS. I picked JS for my company. That's the programming language of our company, JS. And while I think that is a good argument, I think it's a bad argument to pick JS. Like, arguing that you want just one language for your entire company, that's fine. But picking JS was a horrible choice. You might be like, oh, well, JS supports, the web and everything too. Well, have you not looked at, say, Java? Java has web aspects to it. .NET Core definitely has web aspects to it. ASP.NET. So there's so many other choices that you can like literally pick. You didn't have to pick JS. JS is convoluted. It's not typed, or I should say, it's not strongly typed, or type strict as they call it. I think that's what it's called. Um, let's go back to Angular. 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 So as a programmer, I am very confident in my ability. I can design algorithms, implement data structures, the whole 9 yards. But Angular, having to learn Angular, a framework that I feel like Express and Node, I don't like them, but they're not as bad as Angular. Node and Express together, they're actually, it's actually pretty good. I don't like it still, but it's pretty good. Angular. If I could pick a more fuckfest of packages, components, and requirements, restrictions, constraints, all into one, more so than Angular, I will fucking eat my hat. I will streak in the middle of December. I will go streaking in the middle of December and jump in a frozen lake. Angular is a flaming pile of garbage. It forces you into a workflow, for one. It forces you to use their patterns. It forces you to not do things intuitively. For instance, calling methods from the template, from the HTML template, is highly discouraged. And there's a reason for that. Because it doesn't work. Let me rephrase that. It doesn't work sometimes. It doesn't work half the time. I don't know how long. I don't know the percentage of when it does or when it doesn't work. But the point is, like, if you're doing something and intuitively as a programmer it should work, but then it doesn't, that's red flags right there. That's red flags. So you're calling a method once, and then it gets called, for instance, a bajillion or an infinite number of times. Now that is because of Angular. It's not because of JS. It's not because of HTML. It's not because of CSS. It's because of Angular. So Angular has this thing called state. It's not specific to Angular. Everything basically has state, but it has change detection on the template, or it seems that way. So if anything were to change, let's say you're calling in the template, you're in the template already, right? And you call a method, and then that method goes and changes something in the template. That template then has to refresh everything. And then it has to call that method again. And it's just an endless loop, an endless cycle. Now, it makes sense when you think of it that way. But that's only if you understand that there's change detection in the background running. It shouldn't be that way. If you're going to call a method right, in code, the path of the code, the flow of the code, the path, the trace, uh, should only go once, right? And that change detection should only happen when you, as the programmer, invoke it, either directly or indirectly. Either way, you, as the programmer, knowingly made that change. When you go and write code and things act out of whack because of the system that you're forced to operate on, that is that that is not a good thing. So Angular also, you can turn that off, by the way. It's highly discouraged. Um, I honestly haven't tried turning it off because honestly, there's no point now. Because if you turn that off, you might as well just not use Angular anymore. It just makes no sense. Like there should be a if you're in the template, right? You're in that instance. Like templates should be instances. It shouldn't be routines because that's how it's behaving now. So templates right now in Angular, the reason why the change detection thing happens, it feels like everything's a freaking routine. If it was an instance for instance, once you're in the template, right, it calls a method, and that method changes something that's within the template, the instance, and it's just basically just following the code path. It's not triggering anything, it's right there and then, you know. But that's not how Angular works. And honestly, I think it's a horrendous thing. Oh yeah, they also have this thing called the HTTP interceptor. Now, I don't know whose bright idea that was, but as a programmer, if I'm using an API, a network API, I expect it to just make the call, get a response using the network stack. Go to network stack, go through a network stack, get all the information sent up, get all the information sent back. But no, someone decided in Angular, we need an HTTP interceptor. Now, for debugging purposes, I can see the use in this, as a debugger. But as a actual viable in production use for it, I don't see why. Because literally every HTTP call you make now, whether you know it or not, is being intercepted, right? Not only that, you specify in the interceptor, you can mutate the request. You can mess with the headers, change it, take things away, add, stuff like that. You can do anything. So, I mean, if you're calling one place, if you're making calls to one place, right? Let's say you need an auth, a bearer token, for instance, right? And you need, let's say you needed to add that bearer token to every call you make to that one place. All right, that works. That's fine. That's fine. Let's give them that. But if your application makes calls to multiple origins, let's say one goes to your backend, another one goes to Google Storage, another one goes to your email server, another one goes to Redis, another one goes to not Redis. Redis has their own port, but if it goes somewhere else, anywhere that's an HTTP request, it is being intercepted, and then that bearer token is added. You know how much havoc that creates? Like, oh, this bear token is for your backend, right? Oh, but here I'm trying to make a request to Google Cloud Storage, and that also takes a token. Ooh, guess what happens there? Ooh, now we see the conflict. You, as a programmer, a system should not conflict itself. An application should not have any components which conflicts itself. Now, by the way, you can bypass this by using the HTTP backend